One of them, the one that we mentioned last time, which is the transition or the from very democratic system, which is at the time of Khilaf al-Rashida, even though it was not called as such, but from the time of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Muslims were really implementing a system of governance. Of course, and I believe that there is no Islamic system, political system. There are Islamic political principles, and these were implemented. I mean, the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did not establish a religious state, but he established a state that was based on constitution and citizenship. You can read it in the one page that he wrote in Medina. It was clearly the concept of constitution, that people are come together, but on that social contract. They call it social contract nowadays. And then you can read there the idea of citizenship, that everybody in Medina is citizen regardless of their religion. And then it continued, and with about 30 years after that, Khilaf al-Rashida, where we had leadership by consent, we have transparency, we had accountability, we had justice, equal opportunities, you name it. All the elements of the contemporary democratic system, they were there. I mean, to move from that situation to a situation where you have a family ruling, or one man having absolute power, decide on everything, decide on war and peace, manage the treasure freely, decide they can decide to punish someone, torture someone, jail someone, just because they execute someone. And there was no accountability. There was no, and then of course that absolute power was inherited by the son or the brother. And it's gonna depend on that. So that's not something that we should take it lightly, because we are still suffering from it. Because what happened before that, it's still happening now. And what happened after that, it's still happening now. So what happened before that was a civil war. And that civil war resulted from power struggle. There is no question about it. There is no point in wasting time to say who's right and who's wrong and etc. That's useless now. But it was power struggle. It was a power struggle that resulted in a bloody civil war. Now, is this just history and we're wasting time talking about? That's not true. Because until now, almost in every Muslim country, and especially in the Arab world, if there is one thing to point to that is causing all of this mess that you see, it's power struggle. It's people are fighting for power at any cost and by any means. They are ready even to solicit some power, even if that destroys the country. They have no hesitation to do that. We have seen it in Iraq. We have seen it everywhere. That power struggle, and even inviting foreign powers, even to occupy the country, it doesn't matter. Just get us there, get us to power. So that power struggle that resulted in a civil bloody war is still going on, and throughout our history, the only time that power struggle was suppressed is when there was dictatorship. So it's either one or the other. So dictatorship, then people will be quiet and there will be stability. But then the moment some signs of weakness appear in the state or government, then you have another messy transition that usually results in a bloody civil war, power struggle until a new dictator or new family or new dynasty establish law and order. I mean, when you have people living for hundreds of years, for centuries, in this dilemma, you can't, I mean, you cannot hope for a better situation than what you see, because we are still going through the same cycle. And the Arab Spring showed that, or confirmed that you either live under dictatorship or you transition to chaos. So back and forth between the two. That has to be tackled from the roots, because there are deeply seated, because this led to something very serious, which is when the scholars legitimized power, any power that established law and order, regardless of how they govern and regardless how they get to power. That's very serious. You have fiqh now. There is a fiqh that is, so you have fiqh and culture and history, all, there is a fiqh that legitimizes power, that establish law and order regardless, dictatorship, not dictatorship, there is no problem. And you have a history of people are used to this, and you have a culture that has no problem with dictatorship as long they bring some stability and decent life, reasonable life. Majority of people, majority of Muslims do not reject dictatorship by principle. They reject it when it does not provide for them a reasonable life, or they are not from it. Example, take any political party, any, especially those that are based on ideology. They have no problem with dictatorship if they are in power. The moment they are out of power, then they start calling for freedom and democracy and justice and etc. But when they are in power, it doesn't matter. So that's almost all Islamist, nationalist, leftist, you name it. All the political parties that are based on ideology. These are the elite. These are the political activists. The masses, as I mentioned, if life is reasonably okay, it's okay, they don't mind. So how can we change a situation if you have the elite fighting for power by any means and at any cost? And if they are in power, it's no problem, even if they exercise dictatorship. And the masses, all what they care about is reasonable, decent life. It doesn't matter anything else. Where are we going to go with this? So that's a turning point that still has its consequences until this moment. That people, they lean more toward adapting to a situation rather than changing it, until they cannot take it anymore, and then they rebel or they revolt. But overall, even if situation gets worse, the prevailing culture is to adapt and squeeze yourself and deal with suffering that results from oppression and corruption as if it is the consequence of natural disasters, as because of an earthquake or because of tornado or whatever, even though it was not. It's because of oppression and corruption and failure of governments, but you were raised to try to adapt to this rather than changing it. And you were raised not to reject this by principle, that you will not compromise freedom no matter what. It's not like anybody who just save us from chaos and bring some stability or law and order, who just accept that and consider it legitimate. So it is really badly needed that people study and draw lessons and switch or change course, because we're going nowhere with this fiqh that legitimize power that brings stability. We're going nowhere with this culture that accepts dictatorship if it brings reasonable life. And we're going nowhere with elites who are obsessed with power to the point they are ready to fight for power at any cost, by any means. Even if the country is destroyed, even if it is occupied, they don't mind. Those who are in power, they want to stay in power at any cost and by any means. And those who are outside, they want to get to power, but at any cost and by any means.
I have an uncle who lives in Egypt. He is an Egyptian by now, and his family, his kids. And when we talk to them about what's going on in that country, their response is always like, God bless the stability and security. We don't want things to go in chaos, so we're okay with what's going on. They tell me, look at what happened in Syria and in the other countries. Why would we hope for any change? And they recognize what's going on, what the wrong that is going on in that country, but they are happy with the safety and security as opposed to the chaos that happened in other countries. My question is, I know there is a third or a middle ground or a way for change in principle that is not chaotic. And maybe that's what you're referring to. I would like to hear more about that, because automatically most people think when they consider that, yes, we have rulers who are dictators who inherited the leadership and not in a fair way. They don't think of the peaceful way of change. They think of revolution. My question is, how can we think? How can we learn other ways of change?
Yeah, that's very, very valid question and very important. And there is unfortunately no easy way, because we're talking about deeply seated culture, deeply seated fiqh, and centuries of history. So any hope of quick changes or quick solutions is an illusion. If we want to break this cycle of adapting the situation until it becomes unbearable, and then revolting to create chaos, and then accepting a new dictatorship, adapting to it until it becomes unbearable, there is only one way, at least for in the case of Muslims. I have no hope or illusion of waiting for a political leader or a political party to lead a movement to break this cycle. I think we waited for too long, and we have seen that even political party that starts honest and they end up, because of the power structure, they end up in that trap of compromising their principles for the sake of power. When they realize that their path is very long to power and risky and bumpy, but there is a shortcut, which is basically to give up on your project of change or reform, and then accept to be brought to power, but to manage the status quo. That has happened many, including Islamists, unfortunately. They fell in that trap, which is so waiting after trying almost everybody, waiting for something like Turkey or Malaysia or Singapore or South Korea. It's not going to happen. At least that's my opinion, and that's my estimate. So we are left only with one option, which is long, takes a lot of time, a lot of efforts, which is the bottom-up approach, not the top-down. The grassroots approach that starts with awareness, starts with paradigm shift, changing this mindset that accept the minimum, or to be okay with the minimum, even if your rights are taken away from you, even if you are oppressed, even there is injustice, just manage to get by. That mindset has to change. It's going to take a lot of time. The only option is the grassroots awareness and trying to organize people, raising the awareness. And once people buy into this idea of the necessity of change, both as a religious duty, as civic duty, as also, even if you are selfish and you care about the future of your children, the best way is to work to change the situation so that they can live in a better condition. Not to think about, let me try to make some money and keep for them some property or some wealth, etc., so that they can do okay. No, the idea is what all of this will be useless if you leave them under oppressive regime and corrupt. They can take that away from them in no time. The smart option is for a generation to make the sacrifice so that future generation will reap the fruits of that change. But there is nothing easy or quick. We're talking about very similar situation to when countries were occupied. When countries were colonized, there was no easy way to push back colonization. It was raising the awareness, making people believe that change is needed, is necessary, it's worth the cost and the sacrifice. Because keep in mind that majority of populations lived under colonization for a long time, accepting it, until some people came and start saying, no, this is not qadar, that's not a destiny, this should change and can change, and we're not bound to live under humiliation and occupation forever. And even though they are superpower, but we have just cause. Until people start buying into that and start joining the liberation movement and participating from their everybody, whatever they can do, they were contributing, nothing will change. Nothing has changed before that. I mean, France stayed in Algeria for 100 years, 100 years, and people were accepting it. So it's a very similar situation, even though there is no foreign occupation in most countries, but it's a very similar situation that requires very similar approach, which is a grassroots movement that starts with people embodying the change and raising the awareness, educating people, convincing them that they can and they should work for a better life for themselves and especially for their children, and accepting this idea that at least one generation has to pay the price and sacrifice so that future generation can live a decent, dignified life that hundreds of millions of people in the world, what we consider as a dream, it's a reality that is lived by hundreds of millions of people around the world. And we have the difficulty convincing our people even to accept it as a dream, to work for. You tell them about this, they say, oh, no, you're dreaming. as if it is something bad. So there is something that a lot of people in the world are living it as a reality. They made it happen. It was a dream for them, but then it came true. And now we're having difficulty convincing our people to accept this as a dream and a goal that they should work for. Like our grandfathers and grandfathers at certain point in time, they were dreaming of independence, even though it was a dream, because when you're fighting the British or fighting the French, these are the superpowers of the time, especially with very primitive tools. It was like a dream. Independence was a dream, but it became reality. People at that time were, when they close their eyes, they see themselves free countries with no foreign army. That's the same thing should happen. We should get our people to believe in this dream of living in a society that where there is leadership by consent, there is real justice, there is equal opportunity, there is fair and honest and open competition, there is equality before the law, there is what other people are living around the world. So it can. It all starts with a dream, but the dream that you have a core group buy into it, and that core group, they have the responsibility and the burden and the duty to grow to become a mass movement. None of this is easy. None of this is simple. We have our people, they are deep in despair. They have so many excuses. They are leaning more toward adapting to the situation and justifying failure. They have a lot of excuses. They will tell you, we tried before, we are doomed, we are poor countries, that's our destiny. You just have to accept and be patient, and you will get some religious misconceptions here and cultural twisted ideas here and there, and the whole thing leads to only one conclusion: ليس بالإمكان أحسن مما كان. Things could not be better. That's the mindset that is dominant among our people, is that things could not be better. And the people who told you from Egypt, because they think that the two options is what they are, the conditions they are living under, or Iraq or Syria or Yemen, etc. So, of course, given the choice between the two, you will accept that situation, because the third option is not even there.
Yeah, it's understanding the grassroots movement as a track, and making sure that a lot of people, or a good enough number of people, adopt it and start to propagate to the rest of the community. And having this long-term planning mindset is what our people lack. There's no conception of long-term planning. The most they can think of is a week or a month ahead.
Yeah. Accepting the fact that this took centuries to develop, and therefore it's going to take time. As I said, at least one generation have to accept this idea that we are going to pay the price, even though we're not going to reap the fruits. But it's worth it. We're going to pay the price for this change. But again, it's an uphill battle, because our people, they are in so many traps around them. You get them out of despair, they fall in another trap. You get them out of this. Life is very difficult in most Muslim countries. People are very busy with just making ends meet. Bureaucracy is killing a lot of time and causing a lot of frustration. Any little administrative thing that you need takes you so much time and a lot of frustration. Infrastructure is bad, healthcare is bad, education is bad, that you have to make up for it with paying your money for tutoring and private, etc. That by itself is marginalizing a large portion of the population, that they have don't have the time or the stomach or the mind or for anything. They're just working hard and worried about tomorrow and again. So the living itself is marginalizing, and that's a lot of time by designing. A lot of time is design. And then if you think about other stuff, if you think about a lot of things that keeping nowadays in many Muslim countries, drugs of all kinds is being pushed in generations. I heard that even elementary schools and middle schools nowadays having this problem. Then you have a lot of things that keeping people busy, and then you have the camouflage. This keeping people busy with politics that is useless, because what we see in front of us, that's not the real thing. That's the facade. So people are busy, they meet, they keep talking about politics in their country and in other Muslim countries. They follow on social media, they watch political talk shows, and they think they are doing something good. All of this is basically a waste of time, because that's not the real thing. That's what is meant to keep you busy. If none of the other traps worked with you, if you manage to be like middle class and your life is okay, if you are not addicted to anything, sports, video games, whatever, drugs, anything, so you insist on being politically engaged, okay, we have a solution for you. We can keep you busy with this nonsense politics. That is, it's the power struggle. Who's good, who's bad. It's a struggle between tribes. They call them parties. There is no real political parties, because parties means institutions, means a program, platform. There is none of this. There are just tribes fighting for power. And when power goes from one party to another, no policies are changing, because these are puppets that they come to power to manage the status quo. It's unfortunately I don't see any other way except that each one who believes in this becomes a nucleus for the change, and then start working in their environment. First of all, to embody the change, because people need to see it. I strongly recommend all the time to young people I talk to in different Muslim countries, is basically, if you really want to change, then you have to start with yourself. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Starting from tomorrow, try to behave as if you are living in an advanced country. Just imagine yourself living in Sweden or Denmark or whatever. And then respect the law, perfect your work, do observe or fulfill all your duties. Also, don't compromise on your rights. Don't pay bribe for something that is your right. Don't get it by paying. Don't accept the bribe. That's the only way. There is no other way. And then while you're doing that, people around you follow you. صلوا كما رأيتموني أصلي, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Do as you see me doing. It's going to be very hard, but it gets easier every step. It will be very hard to convince the first person, one of your friends or colleagues, to follow you. But when you are two, it becomes easier to convince a third. And when you are three, it's going to be easier, etc. I don't really see another way. I mean, we can put our heads in the sand and dream about solutions that something is going to come out of what's going on, but we're really following illusions. I'm afraid that we will spend years and years and find ourselves in the square one, only with more disappointment, because illusions leads to disappointments.
Assalamu alaikum. I think this, now we call this dream. There is another like a trial, or there's another projects where like Dr. Jassim Sultan calling for major current in the whole ummah. There is a Dr. Muhammad al-Tullabi call it change the elite, the nukhba. So all of it almost very similar, but the problem is if we apply the rule of التحدي والاستجابة, challenge and response, which was called by the British historian Arnold Toynbee. He studied civilizations, and he wrote several books about this. But this rule is very important. I mean, the problem here, sometimes the response will take hundreds of years, or the change, I would say. If you see the response is very slow or very ineffective or very faint, then there is a problem, which is mostly the paradigm, the culture. The culture needs to be changed, and it will not change very quick. It will take a lot of trials. Like people has to see something. Like we saw the Arab Spring failed. Maybe another iteration of Arab Spring will come after this situations, and it could fail again. So I mean, this could take hundreds of years. In Europe, they used to be in a very bad situations, maybe similar to what we have, maybe worse. I don't know. But I think it took them hundreds of years, steps. Like in the beginning, they did not believe in science. They had people coming from Spain or from Andalusia or from the Arab Muslim golden age, where people used to have universities and there is science and stuff at that their time. So people start changing slowly in Europe. I think this will happen here. I don't have a lot of hope myself. I think maybe I'm wrong, but and I hope I am wrong, but I don't think things will change that fast.
It's not going to happen by itself, and as I mentioned, there is no fast way to change this. But if, especially our time is different, things can be done much faster because of all the communication, etc. Not very fast, but faster maybe than Europe. We don't need to hundreds of years. Keep in mind that Europe, they did that because they had to discover democracy, not to cut and paste. So a lot of things will help making it faster, but not fast. The bottom line is to find your way and to be on the right track. Then time can help. We are in a state of loss. We did not even find our way back to the highway, the point where we get lost. So the moment, all what I'm saying is, if we find our way and start working on it, start moving in that direction, yes, there will be setbacks, there will be bumps in the way, but we'll get there. We'll get there. How long? Only Allah knows. Our problem is still, we did not find our way yet. We did not break the vicious cycle. We are in a vicious cycle that need to be broken. And if we manage to break that cycle and put ourselves on the right track, then time will be helpful. On the other hand, if we're going to continue thinking the same way, hoping for something to happen, hoping that because of time things will change, no, things will not change because of time. If you are not on the right track, time is not going to help you. Time is part of the solution when you are on the right track. No, we are not. So we have seen it centuries, and we did not find. So we find our way, and our way is what I explained. I don't think there is any other way except for a group of people, small group of people in every country to agree to make this happen. It's like how the liberation movement started, to make this happen and to commit to make it happen regardless of the sacrifice and the time, and to be patient with their people, because you're talking about people who were really has twisted religious concept, has a culture that is conducive to excuses and failure and justification not to change, to adapting, not to change. So you have to be very, very patient, because and also, in addition to be the change, or to embody the change and be patient, but also you need to be very compassionate, because our people, they heard a lot of good things and they were deceived many times. So now to believe you, it's not going to be easy, because the first thing they will tell you, this is impossible, or we heard this before by people, and then when they got to power, they changed. So to have that message that really we don't want anything from you, really, because we care about you. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا. If you firmly believe in that change and embody it, and have this compassionate discourse, very honest, truthful, that comes from the bottom of your heart, just because you care about your people and you care about the future, it will click. It will not be easy. It will click. It will be one person at a time. It's not like convincing the masses yet, because that's a big change. It's a mindset change of mindset and paradigm, and against deeply seated cultural and religious ideas or misconceptions. So nothing is going to be fast, and nothing is going to happen easy.
Brother Hamid, are you, since you're host, are we going by like raise hand and we can speak, or what's the protocol?
Well, I'm not the host.
Oh, it shows host next to your name, so I'm assuming.
Oh, okay.
I have my hand raised, but if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I will try not to take so long. Alhamdulillah, I'm very, very happy to hear the talk from Sheikh, or from our scholar, Dr. Ghannouchi, and I want to share with you, at least, I am 57 years old. I've been in this area in the U.S. for almost 42 years. I lived through something called the Sahwa. I don't know how many people are old enough on this call know or remember in the 80s there was something called the Sahwa al-Islamiyya. I mean, it's not unthinkable that awakening can occur. That awakening, I look back at it, and I know from the mid 80s, by that, literally people in small groups were talking about that the Muslims need to come back to their deen and awaken, and by the mid 90s it was a global I want to say phenomenon, but However, looking back at it, there was an awakening, but people, what they awakened for, I believe they did not really have taken a step back and say, we're awakening for Islam. Okay, what does that mean? What is the religion that Allah intended? I mean, is it what in the so-called Sihah? Is that the tradition that has been known for hundreds of years, or is it based on the Quran and a deep understanding the Quran as the primary and the main source for that way, and it took me years to understand the situation that in my view the Ummah is not clear on what the Islam is. They consider some things that are tradition, and if it's done by tradition of hundreds of years, that's the deen, that's Islam. But all you have to do, look at the verse in the Quran, and it will be clear that there's a contradiction, that the Quran says something about the punishment for zina, for example. And I've done random samples in people around me, believe it or not, and they tell you, yeah, it's rajm. And you go ask around, where is the rajm in the Quran? I don't see it. And then when you find out, and I'm not going to take time to say where it's actually some hadith that overwrites the Quran, and that becomes the understanding for millions that this is how it happened. It's a verse that should have been in the Quran, but it's now in the hadith, understanding. And this is the very, very, very tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. So, inshallah, people, the understanding of the al-aql and naql, just the other 2 Fridays ago, the khutbah, the khatib literally said that. I'm not going to say in our area. He said, religion is by naql, and aql is outside religion. This was in the khutbah, and I'm hearing this. I don't know. I feel so sad and so disappointed. And on the spot, I looked up يتفكرون. Look up search how many times the Quran mentions لقوم يتفكرون. 23 times, 24 times. Allah says that you should think and understand the reason that believing in his existence is by aql as well. It's not naql. So without taking too long, it's what is the steps for the awakening? It is really at the very fundamental level. We need to have conversations in the community, start small group, and within the community, what are the things that really make the deen or the Islam these concepts of does Allah want us to think? Does this want to natadabbar? Does he want us to natafakkar? Yes, he does. It's by and where do we take our understanding of what the deen and Islam is? That is it because of some hadith? Then we can accept, okay, it's in a hadith. It says that rajm is the punishment of zina for muhsanat, but for the غير المحصنات it's something else, and completely contradicts the Quran. There's no value for those verses in the Quran other than just for tabarruk. That's it. You just read them; they don't mean anything.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Khalid. These are excellent points. I think that's the second turning point that inshallah will dedicate next session about it, which is this idea of ijtihad and the aql and the nas, the position of the intellect and contemplation and reflection in Islam, which is critical position, but it was marginalized completely. and we had the dominant Salafi idea that you should not think, you should just memorize whatever was said, and then rather than Quran, it became the Hadith, and then rather than Hadith, it became the books of Torah, and we made a big mess there. So this idea of freezing ijtihad, this idea that every Hadith in Sahih is authentic, even if it contradicts the Quran, there are a lot of dangerous, very severe, serious misconceptions that also explain why we are where we are. So we tackled one turning point, which is the transition to dictatorship and dynasty. But I think it's worth a whole session. It's the idea, who said that we need to stop ijtihad and rely on whatever work done by Salaf? Who said this? Who said that every hadith in Sahih is authentic, even if it contradicts a verse in Quran? These are very serious matter, and it is causing a lot of problems today. So hopefully, inshallah, next time we'll have it dedicated to this. Jazakumullah khair.
وإياك.
So inshallah, we close and we'll meet next week, inshallah.
مثلا
Salam. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.